I thought, oh my goodness, all the Democrats are leaving Texas. This is a great thing, right? But it turns out that wasn't exactly the motivation. And I learned this today, Chris. Unlike most legislatures that only require a simple majority, for the Texas legislature even to convene, they have to have a 2/3 quorum. And so the Democrats, the idea was, screw you guys, we'll just leave the state, go to Illinois, and you won't even be able to have a quorum, so you won't be able to get your gerrymandered redistricting lines voted, right? So what do you think, Chris? Good idea, bad idea? Welcome to episode 82 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm. Today is August 7th, 2025. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host, and I'm joined by Chris Heald, who's the firm's supervising attorney. Chris, I've got a case I want to propose that we take, okay? Now, we normally don't do appeals, but you're going to love this one, and I want to take it, okay? I got a call from a guy, all right? He sued an airline company after they lost his luggage, but sadly, he lost his case. He wants us to appeal it. All right, there's my dad joke for the day, okay?
All right.
Let's talk about what's on our docket today. Texas Redistricting Explained. I really did not want to cover this piece. Everybody's covering it, but we have a lot of content on social media, and it occurred to me that a lot of people in general just don't understand it. So we're going to explain redistricting, talking about whether it's legal or not. And then our legal questions section, this came from our attorney group chat. We're going to answer the question about a lot of assumed name stuff. Can you file an assumed name simultaneously with your certificate of formation when you're forming an LLC? And then when you're selling an LLC or when you're selling the assets and the new buyer wants to be sure that assumed name transfers or that DBA transfers, what do you do? Okay, so that's our legal questions section. And then finally, in our rant and rave section, we're going to be talking about the law surrounding no parking signs. All right.
Love it.
Let's get it kicked off with our legal news section. Texas Redistricting Explained. Is it legal? Chris, have you seen this in the news? Have you followed it at all? Have you heard about it?
My wife asked me about it yesterday and I had no answer. So no,
yeah.
I have not.
And to be fair, Chris, you took constitutional law at Baylor, correct?
I took in law school. Yeah, we had to take con law.
I took the same thing at the University of Houston, and I memorized stuff to pass the test, and then after that, I promptly forgot. There's very little money in constitutional law, and as lawyers, we don't really practice that, especially in Texas, doing what we do. So I had to really build this out to be able to explain it.
I think there are three guys that do it, and those three guys do very well at it. If you're Ted Cruz, you do great at it.
Yeah.
Anybody else, there's no room in that space for anyone else.
You can be a law school professor if you want. All right, we have this thing called proportional representation, and in the House of Representatives, and all that means is the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 2. You were supposed to take a census. You're supposed to figure out where everybody lives in the country or in your state, and you're supposed to give them a proportional vote, right? So everyone's one vote is supposed to count for one vote. You can't water that down. The framers of our Constitution, the founders of our country wanted your vote to count, Chris. We have equal protection, and that's the 14th Amendment. And it reinforces the principle of one person, one vote, and your vote is equally protected. Now, Chris, you take a census every 10 years. Did the guy come around? Did he come around to your house? Did you voluntarily comply with your census last time?
I declined to answer.
Okay. I kept throwing the thing away. And then finally, they were so persistent, the guy actually came out to my house. And I remember, I was like, fine, this is unbelievable. He's come out to my house. We sat down, we did the whole census in person. I mean, I was blown away, but we did it. Okay.
I didn't know they did that. I know there's an SNL skit about a census, but we won't get into that.
Okay. Let's not do that. It turns out you don't have to wait 10 years. It's just been the custom. It's not illegal to do it sooner. The deal is after you take a census, Texas redraws its congressional and legislative district maps. It reflects the population changes. Okay. The way Texas does it is the legislature has the primary authority to draw these maps. And then you pass a law, and then hopefully it passes. We're not going to get into the details of what happens if it doesn't pass. But all that to say, the state of Texas cannot gerrymander the districts. And the Democrats are accusing the Republicans in Texas of gerrymandering these districts. Now, if you look at districts all across the country, and the irony is all the Democrats in Texas left to Illinois. We'll talk about why that is in a moment. And they landed essentially in the most gerry-districted state in the union. Because if you look at districts in Illinois, it looks like someone drew a pencil with the districts for a very specific purpose. But Texas, for a long time, we've used gerrymandering to entrench political power. You're not really supposed to the U.S. federal law, they're less concerned with political power and they're more concerned about racial discrimination. You're not supposed to do that, but all kinds of way to gerrymander. Chris, have you heard about cracking or packing? Is Ed familiar at all?
No, I can figure out what that means, but I do recall gerrymandering from high school. I remember that was one of those bold terms that you read, and we had to learn what it meant. But it would seem that both sides are always going to accuse the other side of doing that. You can't make every district square like a grid because then you won't have equal population. So you're going to have to do them a little bit. But yeah, you can, what you're talking about, you look at them and you say, they went way over here, then they went way back over here, and then they jutted up here. And then some of that looks wonky too.
Yeah, a little bit of salt is a good thing. Too much salt, not so good.
But I'm guessing what you're saying is people either you pull a couple of one side out of a district to maybe help your party in that district, or you just pack them all into one district so I can put every single person of my political opponent in there, and then they get one district loaded with their people, and then I can have all the surrounding districts, and all I need is a slight majority, but now my people count for more.
There's a lot of that going on. Really, it was the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that was supposed to stop the racial component of that. The Democrats are upset. They think Texas population has grown and it's been mostly minority growth, people of color, and the people of color are not getting proportional representation. That's why the Democrats are mad. Is it legal? Texas's redistricting process absolutely is legal. They're following the constitutional procedures, but you can't violate the Federal Voting Rights Act and make it discriminatory. Okay, that's all that is. Now, here's something that really caught my attention here. Chris, did you see this? Why did the Democrats flee the state? What did you see? They were just getting on airplanes and flying to Illinois?
No, I did not see that.
And I thought, oh my goodness, all the Democrats are leaving Texas. This is a great thing, right? But it turns out that wasn't exactly the motivation. And I learned this today, Chris. Unlike most legislatures that only require a simple majority, for the Texas legislature even to convene, they have to have a 2/3 quorum. And so the Democrats, the idea was, screw you guys, we'll just leave the state, go to Illinois, and you won't even be able to have a quorum, so you won't be able to get your gerrymandered redistricting lines voted, right? So what do you think, Chris? Good idea, bad idea?
Interesting. Again, I know that happens in Washington where they're trying to call a vote, but everybody's gone back to their home district. But aren't they required to be in session, or is this like a special session they're trying to call? How does that work? Can I just leave and suddenly work can't get done anymore?
The law is a little bit unsettled in that regard, Mr. Heald. But Governor Abbott and Attorney General Ken Paxton had an idea. They're threatening to punish the departing lawmakers. They're issuing arrest warrants, and they're even suggesting bribery charges. So if they accept financial support, let's say they get a free hotel room in Illinois, okay, then Governor Abbott's idea is, we will charge them with bribery, or Ken Paxton's idea is we'll charge them with bribery because they got a free hotel room to walk out and impede the vote. So what do you think about that?
I think political games were fun to read about in high school when we were learning civics. Now, as a tax-paying adult, it's not quite as interesting. I wish people would just do their work, whatever side of the aisle they're on, do what you're supposed to do. The taxpayer is ultimately the one that suffers.
Absolutely. And the state of New York and some of these other liberal states, they're saying, hey guys, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So you go forward with this. We're going to start redistricting as well. And we're going to stack our state with Democrat House seats if you try to stack your state with Republican House seats. So that's the big threat here. But all right, that brings us to our legal questions section. And we're going to talk about, does anyone know? Here's the question. Does anyone know if you can simultaneously file for a DBA when you file for a certificate of formation for an LLC? Chris, you're forming an LLC, okay? And you're like, I know I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. Let me get a DBA or an assumed name in here. It's Alpha Beta LLC doing business as world's best chocolate company. So you're gonna do them both. Can you do that, Chris, or do you need separate applications to the Secretary of State?
They're separate forms, so I would think you would do one, then do the other.
You're absolutely right. It's an obvious answer. I don't know. The attorneys that were asking this in the group chat, they're probably going to feel a bit.
We don't want to call out new attorneys. We don't want to do that. I'm sure it's a good question for someone. If you've never formed an LLC, then that makes sense.
I had to step in and say, everybody calm down. Okay. You get your LLC formed first, and then file your application for an assumed name. Okay. That's how you do that. And then the follow-up question, Chris, was, turns out the client was taking over a restaurant business and the seller had their own LLC and they filed a DBA. So it was like Beta LLC doing business as world's greatest restaurant. And the buyer of this restaurant, the buyer of the assets was like, I want to be sure I can still call the restaurant the world's greatest restaurant. How do I get the DBA? How do I get the assumed name? Any thoughts on that, Chris?
If you have to do anything at all, probably just another simple form like everything is, just transferring it. I'm not even sure you would need to do that.
Your inclination is correct. The asset purchase agreements, when a buyer is buying the assets of a restaurant or really any business in an asset purchase, you're getting all the goodwill with it. Okay. And goodwill and brand, that includes the assumed name. So now if you want to really spell it out, by all means, add some language in your asset purchase agreement that says the seller transfers all goodwill, brand, and specifically the assumed name, world's greatest restaurant. You can even put like a further assurances clause in there and say, hey, if we need you to do anything to affect that transfer of the assumed name, you agree to do it. Okay. Can absolutely do that. So very simple stuff, but important stuff. So be sure your asset purchase agreement has some of that language. And then what's going to happen mechanically, Chris, you're right about the form, is that the seller is going to file an abandonment of the assumed name that's actually a form of the Secretary of State. And then the new buyer is they'll then file their new assumed name, right, with the Texas Secretary of State. This is all regulated under the Texas Assumed Business and Professional Name Act. It's Chapter 71 of the Texas Business and Commerce Code. And if you're a business entity, you need to file with the Secretary of State. Sole proprietorships, they're still filing with the county clerks. So
with the recent rule changes, I want to know, have you considered changing the name of the law firm to World's Best Law Firm? Silberman Law Firm, DBA, World's Best Law Firm.
I may have thought about it if I were just starting out. It's a good question, but now that you got so much brand behind the Silberman Law Firm, we're stuck with it for a while. Unless something bad happens to a brand, you can have really bad things happen to brands. I think there was a Sex and the City reboot where Mr. Big dies on a Peloton. Do you remember that, Chris?
So remember would imply I know anything about it. And I absolutely deny knowing anything about Sex and the City.
I'm thinking about brand disasters, right? Where the one at the Coldplay concert, the CEO of some tech company was caught having an affair.
Well, I do remember the Peloton thing though, because Peloton stock has gone down really bad over the last couple of years. And if that had anything to do with it, that's pretty funny.
The stock tanked for a while, right? Because the guy had a heart attack. And what did Peloton do? They tried to clean up the brand. So they hired the actor to go and be in a commercial where everyone, look, the actor is really still alive. Funny. Okay. He just acted like he had a heart attack. And by the way, he's a Peloton user. But then I think it made matters worse because then the actor had some kind of scandalous affair or problem. And then that created brand backlash. It was something like that. So you can have a brand crisis. Peloton could have chosen to rebrand to something else. Facebook obviously rebranded. It used to be the Facebook ticker symbol FB, and then now it's Meta. So Facebook was no longer cool. So you rebranded, different assumed name. All right.
I don't think Astronomer is going to rebrand. Although we were talking about the aura farming kid, and then one day later, the Coldplay Astronomer thing comes out, and now that's out of the news already too. So maybe they did damage control. I don't know. Haven't heard anything.
Yeah. All right. Our rant and rave section, my favorite part of the show, no parking signs. Chris, I thought you would be especially passionate about this because we've driven places together. You don't like the way I drive. You often don't like where I park. You don't like it when I drive a golf cart just because I'm not a good golfer. So I tend to drive my cart over the white out of town
look, when it says cart path only, it means cart path only. I'm a stickler for the rules. I will tell you though, Houstonians make parking spaces. Places in parking lots that are not parking spaces, Houstonians just park there like it's normal. That's weird to me.
You don't have a shortage of parking in Wyoming.
No, we don't. But I still don't think you're allowed to claim a shortage allows you to park wherever you want. And no parking here to corner. That's what got me when I first moved here. People are parked along half the block, but for some reason you can't park on the rest of the half of the block. And so when I would go to Midtown, I got towed a couple times when I first moved here. So yes, I've got lots of parking issues in Houston.
Let's talk about that. How to interpret parking signs. Okay. I got a $50 parking ticket. Here are the facts. You have an intersection, okay? And then you've got a sign that just simply says no parking, and it doesn't specify between the sign and the intersection. It just says no parking about 30, and it's located about 30 feet from the intersection, okay? How do you interpret that? Does that mean to you cannot park between the sign and the intersection, and then you can park on the other side of the sign, or how do you interpret that?
I run away. Like I was just talking about, I'm now overly cautious. If there's a no parking sign on any side of the street, I just assume you cannot park on that side of the street.
For how far down the street?
Because
the whole street.
Because no parking means no parking on this side of on this block. No parking here to corner is here to corner, which again, I was unfamiliar with. Now that you see them, if you're familiar with the concept, you know it exists. But we've never been familiar with the concept of you can park on this half of the block, but not this half of the block. Most places you can either park on this block or you cannot park on this block.
Okay. I got a parking ticket. I parked on the other side of the sign. Okay. I thought the implication was no parking here to the intersection, parked on the other side, got a $50 parking ticket. I was mad about it. I called up the city and I said, hey, show me what ordinance are we talking about here? Is there something like that I don't know about? But I parked away from it on the other side. Turns out the city then promptly called me back and said, oh, Mr. Silberman, we're sorry. The officer said they issued that in error. My interpretation was correct. Who would have thunk it? I like it when I get things right every now and again. That's cool. Here's a little tip for everybody. We're talking about being towed in Texas. I park in private parking lots all the time. And if it says, you say you're in a strip center and those little signs that say this restaurant only or no parking here, I just totally disregard those. I consider those advisory. I've never been worried about getting towed. Do you know why, Chris?
If you tell me because they're not allowed to do that, I'm going to be upset because I have been towed in those situations. Okay. So please tell me.
They're not allowed to tow you. Here's what they have to be able to tow you. Under Texas law, and it's in the Texas Occupations Code, it's chapter 2308. It's called the Texas Towing and Booting Act that governs this. They have to have a sign that states the vehicle will be towed at the owner's expense. It has to explicitly say that. It's got to be 18 by 24 inches, and it's got to include a phrase that says tow away zone. and it's got to have the name and phone number of the towing company, among other things. If it doesn't have that, it's purely just an advisory recommendation. Please don't.
I thought they all did.
But
You're talking about in front of the store that says Chili's parking only. You're saying you can park there and go next door.
Or you can really park anywhere in a private lot that says no parking only, as long as you're not blocking access and as long as you're not parked in a fire lane or a handicap
But all those
space.
parking lots say you must, it says, so-and-so shopping center only. If you go to a different shopping center, they will absolutely tow you. And the sign
that sign has to have all those requirements.
They do. The ones I've seen do.
And they're in compliance, but many shopping centers do not. Okay, that have those signs. But if they're in compliance, they're going to have a lot of them in the nice higher end centers. They don't want to junk up their lot with all those ridiculous looking signs. So you'll often not see the
Also,
signs.
what are you going to do if they do it? What are you going to go argue with someone at the storage yard at 3 a.m. to get your car back and see this was illegal? You still throw.
No, you can actually, it depends how much time you have. You're just pointing out the money versus the time kind of thing. I've never been towed. I'm just telling people out there the law. This show is all about the law. Okay. Whether you want to park there or not, go for it.
No, I know there's a parking lot like on Westheimer that, again, this all happened when I first moved here. We went to dinner and then we walked to the movie theater that's right there. And it's a very common thing that people would do that. But I said, look, we went to dinner in this shopping center, so I'm cool to park here. Came out of the movie. My car was gone. Obviously, the young lady I was with was none too pleased with this, even though she was the native Houstonian that told me I could park there. So it made for a very bad night. So I have all these stories. I'm very traumatized by Houston.
Did not get the second date. Okay. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Chris has been my co-host. Chris Hield has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. Nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you get towed, don't call us or blame us. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend.
Keep it on the car path.